committee secretary to advise if there's any apologies for absence has been received.
Thank you, Chair. We only have apologies received from Councillor Billy Lake. If I can just remind members as well, for the benefit of those viewing the live stream, if you can ensure you use your microphone as well, and when you finish speaking, make sure to press the buttons so the red light goes off. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Mike. Can I ask members for any declarations of interest?
Item number 7, Chair, please. Declaring interest in that.
Just for purposes of the record, Councillor Bennett, could you confirm the nature of your interest, whether it's prejudicial or pecuniary or otherwise?
Non-pecuniary.
Councillor Hanson.
Item number 5, non-pecuniary interest, Chair.
Councillor Maloney.
Thanks, Chair. Just checking on item number 5, I live a couple of 100 yards away from that property, but I've got no other interests other than that. So I don't know whether that counts.
And that's sufficiently remote for you to be able to take part. It's not a valid interest for purposes of our proceedings. Well, thank you, Councillor Maloney.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can I now turn to item 2, which is the minutes of the last meeting, and they're on pages 4 to 8. Can I ask, are the minutes agreed? Thank you.
Sorry, Chair. Can I just add that my name's not correct on the paper? I think people probably just don't know how to spell my name because it's missing.
Okay, thanks, Leila. We'll amend that.
Thank you, Councillor Bennett. That's a limitation on our system when members join the council in recent months. We'll correct that, but thank you for drawing it to my attention. Much appreciated.
Moving on, item 4, which is the Menlove car sales and car wash on Vale Road, Liverpool. Can I invite Brad Burrows to address the committee with his presentation? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. My name is Bradley Burrow. I'm representing Hossel Lloyd Architects. We're the agent on this application and acting on behalf of Plusdane Housing and Penny Lane Builders. First slide, please. Next slide, please. The application site is the former Menlove car sales and car wash on the corner of Menlove Avenue and Vale Road. The site was formerly a garage and car sales business which has ceased trading and is now owned by Plusdane Housing. The site is within Woolton Village Conservation Area and is considered a gateway site into the conservation area as you approach from the south. The site is within 5 minutes walk of Woolton Town Centre with excellent public transport links to and from the city centre. Next slide, please. The existing buildings on the site relate back to its former use. The buildings are incongruous with their surrounding context and are considered to have a detrimental impact on the setting of the conservation area. The site features a mature lime tree, item 2 on this image, and the proposals have been designed around the tree and included measures to ensure its retention. To the northern side of the site, there is a historic lodge building, item 3 pictured here, which would have been twinned with Blackgate Lodge, which lies outside of the site boundary, item 4. Historically, these two buildings would have been gatehouses for a local estate and are therefore considered to have historic significance. The lodge building itself is to be retained, refurbished and brought back into use. Next slide, please. The application seeks permission to construct a new 3/4-storey apartment building with properties to be made available for affordable rent to the over 55s community. An application is being made for funding support to Homes England. The new building will provide a total of 30 apartments, 20 of which will be 1-bedroom, 7 2-bedroom, and 3 will be 1-bedroom wheelchair accessible properties. All have been designed in accordance with nationally described space standards, and 10% have been allocated as M43 properties wheelchair accessible as per inbound planning policy. The building will be allocated 15 parking spaces, including 3 dedicated accessible parking bays and a single electric vehicle charging point. The lodge building will be converted into 2 1-bedroom studio apartments. Next slide, please. We've taken a traditional approach to the design of the building exterior, making use of simple apertures in brick walls. We've picked up on architectural features of the surrounding conservation area, which have been used to inform window proportions and arrangement, examples of which are pictured here. We're proposing a series of feature panels as per the top image on the left of the slide, which will form the primary window to each apartment. These triple windows have been designed to make reference to other properties in the conservation area and relate to them in a contemporary manner. These will provide visual interest to the facade and create a sense of hierarchy, with other adjacent windows being smaller in size. Next slide, please. Being a gateway site, we've considered what would be appropriate in terms of scale. As per the image on the top left of your screen, there is a natural stepping down of massing along Menlove Avenue from the multi-storey Dovercroft apartment block, which you can see on the left, to the 5-storey Reynolds Court building adjacent to the application site. At the opposite end of the site, the Derby Arms Public House is a 2-storey building with generous floor-to-floor heights. The proposals are for a 4-storey element to the northern side of the site, stepping down to 3 storeys at the south. The building has been designed in such a way as to step down to an overall similar overall height as the public house on the corner of Vale Road and Allerton Road, and the proposed massing is considered to be in keeping with the surrounding context. In summary, the proposals are for a 3/4-storey apartment building to be made available for affordable rent to the over 55s. The development will provide a total of 32 apartments, 3 of which will be wheelchair accessible in line with inbound planning policy. Designs have undergone extensive pre-application discussions with Liverpool City Council to ensure the proposals are acceptable in terms of massing and visual appearance. The proposals include for a suite of urban enhancements, including widening of existing footpaths and closing off of highway access points. Designs have been prepared to ensure the retention of the existing lime tree and the reinstatement of the existing lodge building, bringing it back into use. The proposals will replace the existing buildings on site and make a positive contribution to the urban environment. The designs will make a significant improvement on the gateway to the conservation area and relate to the character of the surrounding context. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Brad. Do members of the committee have any questions? Councillor Maloney?
Thanks, Chair. This is quite a large development, and I was wondering what green measures are going to be taken in this. I mean, I would have thought it was the perfect opportunity to have photovoltaic cells on what is quite a large roof area. And I think really given that it's a development by a publicly funded body, I would think that they should be leading by example. So it's just a comment really and a question as to whether this will be considered. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Maloney. Would you be able to answer that, Brad?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the query. It's something that we are continuing to look at. I think the main concern from our perspective in terms of photovoltaic cells, there's 2 elements. Firstly, the orientation of the site, which is relatively north-south, which doesn't lend itself perfectly to a photovoltaic array, and also the concerns in terms of visual impact, given that it is within a conservation area and it is the gateway to the conservation area. They were the main drivers. However, in terms of sustainability, we are looking at designing this to a higher thermal performance than perhaps would be standard, and we're looking at the incoming services to in anticipation of modernising this, so such as the emission of gas and what have you.
Okay, thank you. Do members have any other questions? No, well, thank you, Brad, for the presentation. Can I now invite Councillor Chris Brown to address the committee?
Thank you, Chair. I will be brief in this. I think on the face of it, it seems a good development considering what is on the site currently. But there is concern, and as you'll see within your reports, given there's been a number of representations to myself and to this committee about the scale of the development. particularly when you compare it to neighbouring Reynolds Court and a number of parking spaces that were allocated within the Reynolds Court facility, that this development will add to already increasing parking issues around the area. And Vale Road itself is a narrow road. You know, it's got a Tesco's further up, busy residential road. It's hard enough at times to get your car down there, but also people walking on the pavement as well, and pavement parking being a big issue. But you've also got the issue of Menlove Avenue, a busy road, and this will directly come off the back of that. So given given all of that, my representations today are that that this should be considered and taken back, given the scale of the development and the lack of consideration for additional parking. If this development does go ahead, I would encourage Highways and Plus Dane and potentially Merseyrail as well to meet with me and my colleagues at the earliest opportunity to work out how we can address some of the parking issues around the area as a matter of urgency. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Brown. Do any members of the committee have any questions for Councillor Brown? No? Okay, thank you. Can I bring in now the case officer who will take us through the application and answer some of the concerns that have been raised? John?
Thank you, Chair. I'm John Woodward. I'm the planning case officer for the South team dealing with the application. I won't repeat the information that's been given to you in the presentation. It's a very thorough presentation. There's just a couple of things to pick out that weren't mentioned. Officers have considered the scheme in terms of its residential amenities, examined it in relation to the surrounding properties, because there have been objections about overlooking and it being overbearing. We've assessed it against council standards, which it's all set out in the committee report. We consider there'll be no significant overlooking or loss of amenity to surrounding properties. The applications on the edge of the Woolton Village conservation area. Your conservation officers have worked with the architects on elements of the design and the materials, and we consider now that it causes less than substantial harm to the character and appearance of the conservation area, and in which case the positive benefits of redeveloping what is currently an unattractive prominent site, providing new housing, would outweigh any conservation concerns. Turning to the highways matters, the provision of 15 parking spaces to 32 units is considered sufficient by highways, given the accessible location, the older demographic of the residents, and the availability of on-street parking, which has been observed during surveys, which again is set out in the committee report. One final thing, the application is recommended for approval subject to a Section 106 agreement, which is seeking contributions for open space, provision of street trees, public art and monitoring. And it's recommended for approval, but with the conditions set out in the report. But there's one condition, Chair, that has been pointed out to me, that condition 14 has reference to drop curbs being provided at Woolton Road, and that should be Allerton Road rather than Woolton Road.
Thanks, John. Do members of the committee have any questions? Councillor Thompson.
I note that one of the comments made with regards to the parking is that this development will be very, very close to the Woolton Village Centre, walking distance, in fact, and that's absolutely true. My only slight further thought about that is it's a very hilly area, and it's actually uphill to go to the Woolton Village Centre, and the people living here will be over 55. So some people would struggle. I just wondered what the provision is like in the area for dropped curbs and things for mobility scooters, etc.
I'll answer that, Chair. It's Sandy Dingwall, Highways Development Control Team Leader. When we assess this application, as with all applications, we look at the options for people to travel more sustainably, in particular those on foot and by bike and public transport. And in this case, obviously given the lower levels of car parking that are proposed, which we're entirely comfortable with, we need to make sure that there was the alternatives available for people to travel on foot, etc. So we look carefully at the condition of the footways around the site. The footway adjacent to the site on Vale Road is particularly narrow, so we've sought an improvement as part of this development to widen that footway to 2 metres so that it's properly accessible for all people. We've also identified a couple of locations in the immediate vicinity of the site for the introduction of drop curbs and tactile paving as well, and that's all been secured as part of the off-site highway works condition. I suppose it's always difficult to judge how far you go with that kind of infrastructure. You know, where do you stop essentially? But we felt, given the scale of the development, given where it's located, and given the other options that are available for people to travel about, the package of highway improvements that we've sought are sufficient to meet the requirements of this development, provide suitable access to Woolton Village and nearby facilities. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Andy. Councillor Malone.
Thanks, Chair. Is this the right time for me to propose an amendment?
I haven't moved my recommendation yet, Councillor.
Granted, Chair.
Perhaps you'd like to wait. Are there any other questions for the officer? No. Oh, right.
Hi, John. Thanks for your report. It's for yourself and Andy, really. Item 5.5 on highways. There's a lot of theory in that answer. Parking 15 to 33, 45%, 13% short for car parking spaces. But it's going on the census, and people in their late 70s, it's going to attract. And then people over 75 who haven't got cars. Living by me, personal experience, we've got plus-staying properties by us. We've also got, I worked it out last night, 5 tenants in our flats by us who are over 70 and 4 have vehicles. So I don't see where it comes in where most of these tenants that will be taken on will be over 70, if it's only over 55. And a little question for Brad as well. How long will this stay at over 55s? Because plus-staying have phased out a hell of a lot of places that used to be for over 55s. They've now opened them up to anyone going in. So what's the proposal? How many years are you talking that this will be over 55 and then maybe opened up to anyone?
First of all, can I bring the officer in first? I mean, in relation to over 55s, there's a condition on that, isn't there?
That's correct, Chair. There's a condition. Given the reduced level of parking, we're proposing a condition restricting the occupancy such that at least one resident in each flat is over 55.
Andy, in relation to the question from Councillor Marrett, I mean, in relation to their car ownership, I mean, there's still sufficient off-street parking as well, isn't there? Could you clarify that?
Yeah, that's right, Chair. Obviously, we assess the parking very carefully, as we do with all applications, and you know, it is a development which is targeted at over 55s. There is a condition on it. As people generally get older, car ownership diminishes gradually. I should also add that it's affordable rent, the housing, and we tend to find with affordable rents, again, car ownership levels tend to be lower than it would be if it was private rent or for private sale. We feel that 15 spaces is adequate to serve the needs of this development, but we were also mindful that there was the potential for some further demand for overspill car parking on the surrounding streets. So we asked the transport consultant to undertake a series of car parking surveys in the area at various times. You can see the results there in the report in front of you. And what that shows is that there's some availability for additional on-street car parking in the area at those times that it was surveyed. Furthermore, An officer from my team actually visited the site to verify that those surveys were reflective of the parking conditions in that area. So in general, we feel as the level of car parking is sufficient to meet the demands, but if there was an unmet demand, that could be quite comfortably accommodated on streets in the surrounding area. So therefore, we're comfortable with that. Thanks.
Thanks, Andy. Before I move my recommendation, could I just ask if Brad is still there? Would you like to comment on the question from Councillor Marrett in relation to over 55s?
Thank you, Chair. I understand your point, Councillor. The proposals are for an over 55 scheme, and as the planning officer said, the condition states to that effect. So my understanding is that's what it will be and be maintained as in future.
Thanks, Brad. I mean, I think this application really, it does provide positive benefits. It's a big improvement on what's already there. So therefore, I'm going to move that the recommendation as amended be approved. Is that agreed? Councillor Malone.
Thanks, Chair. If I may make an amendment on the basis of the concern expressed by the committee about the provision of parking and also the concern expressed by the ward councillors as to the scale of the application, my amendment would be that the decision be deferred pending a site visit by the committee. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Is that seconded? I think that falls anyway, Councillor Maloney. Can we go to my recommendation then, please?
Thank you, Chair. And just for benefit of clarification, Councillor Maloney's amendment fell in the absence of seconder, so any amendment is required to be seconded. But when the Chair moves a motion, that is not required to be seconded. With that in mind, Chair, your vote, please.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Bennett.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Hanson.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Mallett.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Prince.
4.
Councillor Maloney.
Against.
And Councillor Key. Thank you, colleagues. That concludes the voting on the application. The vote is 7 members in favour, 1 voting against. Councillor Maloney, whose dissent will be recorded by name, and the application is therefore approved on that basis. Chair.
Thanks, Mike. Can we move on to item 5, which is 1 to 3 Elm Vale, Liverpool 6. We've got no speakers for this application. Can I call on John, the case officer, to take us through this report, please?
Thank you, Chair. My name is John Hayes. I am the team leader for development management in the north of the city. Chair, just some initial housekeeping. Obviously, the tabled update note includes a number of late representations, and I have this morning circulated a further letter from the agents acting on behalf of an objector. And with your permission, Chair, I will just perhaps read some of that. I'm conscious that you have got it, but I think it's probably important just for members of the public that I at least make them aware of some of the content. So I won't go through the credentials of the authorisation. In terms of the background, records show that during the summer of 2019, Mr McNabb submitted a robust and comprehensive objection to the planning application, objection prepared by colleague Chris Nash, an experienced and well-qualified specialist. Defects in the application were identified by Mr Nash, in particular various failures of the proposal to satisfy Council's planning policy, and understand that the Planning Committee decided in September 2019 that the application should be approved. However, the official document of approval was never signed and issued by the Council. Consequently, the building, which is now in place on the site, is unlawful. When work on the development began, Mr McNabb was astonished about the size and the height of the building, as well as its proximity to the boundary wall of the property. talk about various disruption going on and radios playing and so on. Whilst it's recognised that noise and disruption caused by building work are not matters which are generally taken into account during the planning process, had the building been sited at a greater distance, in this case 15 metres, as recommended by the Council's planning policy, it is axiomatic that the nuisance caused by construction would have proved somewhat more bearable to Mr McNabb and his mother. Feel therefore that justified in raising these matters. Given the proximity of the development to 5 Elm Vale, the case was surely one where the full rigour of the council's policy should have been implemented. The work is not yet officially approved, and there is still time for the committee to revisit its own process of determination, which occurred in 2019, and perhaps raise a question as to whether the decision taken at that time was the correct one. Comments above as background turn to more current events which have caused some alarm as the building work has progressed. First one is around privacy. Although the north-facing windows in the building are to be fitted with obscure glazing, it is clear that those windows are capable of being fully opened, giving an unrestricted view both across and into the client's property. This, of course, constitutes a serious breach of privacy. I believe that the provision of opening windows constituted an error on the part of the builder. I do not accept the explanation that the opening windows requires us to ventilate the building during the construction process, a claim which appears to make no sense given the nature of the building's fabric, i.e. internal timber frame. Aware that the council's planning officers are aware of the breach of privacy, however, they also know that the officers are minded to accept the developer's suggested solution, which is to fit screws to the casements, thus preventing them from being opened. As an experienced building technician, regard this suggestion by the developer as being seriously flawed. Reason for this is the process of fixing the casements cannot be described as having any degree of permanence, which is an essential quality if the windows are to be accepted by the planning authority as adequate. Already pointed out to officers how easily and quickly the process of fixing shut the casements can be reversed with a few simple hand tools. I would suggest this fact is unlikely to be foremost in the mind of, the officers have responded by stating the requirement for the windows to remain would be enforceable. However, this fact is unlikely to be foremost in the mind of a resident who decides that the casement fixing could be removed. The only satisfactory and sustainable solution is for the windows to be replaced by units which are manufactured so as to remain permanently shut and incapable of modification. This would ensure that the arrangement on the site does not give rise to any potential endless process of enforcement. Hereby appeal to the committee to ensure that if the development is to receive planning approval, suitable provisions are put in place which require the unsuitable windows to be replaced with the correct type of product so as to protect the client against what could easily become a frustrating round of infringement. Thank you, Chair. I will now take you through the report. So you'll see from the report, Chair, that this was an item that was considered by the Planning Committee back in September 2019. The original report is attached at Appendix 1, and in considering the matter, you are to have regard both to that original report and to this further report, which updates the current position. As is referred to in that objection letter and is mentioned in the report, the Section 106 agreement was signed following the resolution of the Planning Committee back in September 2019 to grant permission subject to that Section 106. Legal agreement was signed, but that was not communicated, unfortunately, to your officers within planning, and so that the decision notice was never released. Your officers were made aware that development was commencing on site and site visits were undertaken by colleagues in enforcement. It then became apparent that the permission had not been released, but also that the development was not entirely in accordance with the approved plans. In addition, obviously, some of the conditions that would normally be pre-commencement could not technically be complied with because commencement had already begun. So for those reasons, Chair, we have continued the dialogue with the developer. We have sought amended plans to provide the precise position and details as the development is now largely built, and they are described further in the report in terms of the distances and so on. And obviously the issue around windows, which I'll come on to in a moment. We've also obviously taken the opportunity, Chair, within the updated report to have regard to the new National Planning Policy Framework, which was introduced in July 2021 and obviously supersedes that was considered by this committee back in 2019. And in addition, Chair, the local plan policies now have more weight given the process of the local plan. So, Chair, the principle of development remains as was set out in the original report. It's considered an appropriate site for this type of development, and issues around design and heritage are almost identical to that was set out again in the previous report. The main issue that needs to be considered are in relation to some of the internal changes that have taken place within the building, and the impact of the windows on that side gable that's been referred to in that objection letter. In terms of the future occupancy, you'll see from the report, Chair, that there's been a minor change in that one of the internal staircases has been removed, and the internal staircase was on that boundary with the objector, where there was going to be where there will be obscure glazing put in. The removal of the staircases has allowed the development to provide for additional rooms to the flats, and they are described as offices within the new plans. The reason that they're offices is because they wouldn't conform to building regulation standards in terms of bedrooms or other usable space within a flat. However, in terms of the external changes, that remains exactly as it was when it was considered back in September 2019. In terms of the external changes, again, you'll have had regard to the objection letter there, and it talks about the impact of the side windows. Those side windows, as you've heard in that objection letter, are currently clear glazed and are opening. When you considered this matter back in September 2019, there was a condition recommended to you that they would be fixed, permanently fixed and obscure glazed, so as to avoid any privacy problems that are now being referred to. What the applicant has advised us is that the windows, the glazing panels will be taken out, the windows will be fixed shut and screwed down permanently, and then the glazing panels will be inserted again with obscure glazing, so that the consequence of that is that they will be permanently fixed shut and they will be obscure glazed. What the objector is saying is that there is still a potential for a future occupier to remove the glazing panel, unscrew the opening elements and make them opening again, which would defeat the object that we're trying to achieve here. Your officer's view is that is extremely unlikely. There is clearly the possibility that may happen, but as I say, I think your officer's view is that is extremely unlikely to occur. And furthermore, the condition that your officers are recommending is that condition is in any case ongoing. So if the windows were to become opening by taking the panels out and unscrewing them, that they would be in breach of the condition. It's an ongoing condition, and obviously that could lead to enforcement action. So the solution that's being put forward is considered appropriate by your officers. Clearly that is something that you may wish to consider further. In terms of accessibility, highways and so on, those matters all remain again as they were back in September 2019. In relation to street trees, or trees generally, there is a new paragraph and a new requirement now through the National Planning Policy Framework, which requires all developments to have regard to the provision of street trees. In this particular case, as with all major applications, we look to achieve street tree planting, usually through the contribution, through a financial contribution. Some of that's already been paid in terms of the original Section 106, and we're happy that would align with the objectives of National Planning Policy Framework. So, subject to the various conditions that are now attached and the Section 106, which will probably need to be modified slightly to reflect the current position, Your officers recommend approval. Happy to answer any questions that you may have, Chair.
Thanks, John. Do members have any questions? Councillor Maloney, then Councillor Keith.
Thanks, Chair. Couple of questions. The report paragraph 352, the ground floor finished floor height is 52.8 metres. Is that correct? I couldn't really understand that.
Yeah, that'll be above a certain datum, and it's slightly different to the one that was originally put forward. I mean, it's not above ground.
Ah, right. Yeah. I thought so.
Yeah, it's clearly not above ground. That would be an enormous building.
Yeah. Thanks, Chair. As to the windows, Chair, I do understand that the neighbours' concern about being overlooked, but I'm also mindful of ventilation. Especially in view of the current health concerns about ventilation in buildings with respect to COVID-19. And I wonder if really the condition could be varied such that the windows could be opened, but to such an extent that they didn't allow any overlooking of the neighbours' property. I do agree that the opaque window panels should be in there. And the final point, Chair, is about car parking. The report mentions a deficit of 10 places, and that Elm Vale will be capable of providing enough room for any additional car parking in the area. Well, anyone who knows Elm Vale knows that it's currently very busy there. It's often very difficult to get a car parking space, both because of residents in the immediate area and also for people who are shopping on the adjacent shops on Prescott Road. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Maloney. John?
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Just picking up on the car parking issue first. The car parking position hasn't altered from the position that was considered by this committee back in September 2019, and the reasons why it was considered acceptable are set out in the appendix report. Your officers recognise that there is a deficit if we were considering a one-to-one. However, we considered that it is appropriate in this location, given that it's in an accessible part of the city. There are different modes of transport available to occupants of those flats, and there is considered to be sufficient parking available on street if it is required. In relation to the issue around the windows and allowing those to be partially opened, so I guess like you have in, say, hotels where you can open them, say, an inch or so, I don't think that is an appropriate solution, unfortunately. I do think they need to be fixed to ensure that degree of privacy. I think what we can do is put a condition on that requires some form of ventilation, mechanical ventilation or trickle ventilation within those properties where there are those windows to ensure that there is adequate ventilation. Again, that's not an unusual condition. It's one we've used on other schemes. So with the addition of that condition, Chair, I think we would overcome Councillor Maloney's particular concerns about ventilation.
Thanks, John. Councillor Kate?
Yeah, so mine was about the windows as well. So I kind of fail to see the point of those windows if they cannot be opened at all, like and if they're sort of opaque, if you can sort of see through them. So will there be rooms that don't have windows at all and will just rely purely on mechanical ventilation? So if the windows are needed for the ventilation purposes, then surely they've got to be able to open. And if they're not needed, why even have windows? Why not just have some other solution that does not cause controversy?
So the windows, some of the windows were to provide light to a stairwell. As I said earlier, they now provide light to an office. I wonder whether we can get the site plan or the room plan on the screen again, if that would be possible. But otherwise, they're all secondary windows, so there is proper natural light to all the rooms The windows on the side that would be obscured are all secondary windows, and they simply provide additional light to those rooms over and above the existing arrangement. Everybody. So suffice to, I think there was another plan. We can get that of just, yeah. So that's a slightly better plan. So you'll see from there that on that elevation, on that northern elevation in particular, you've got secondary windows. So they're all secondary windows. So you've got windows at the front and windows at the rear, which provide the main outlook and the main source of, and so they can be opening, whereas those windows on the side simply just provide an additional light through to the rooms. Hope that clarifies.
Thanks, John. Councillor Prince.
Thanks, Chair. What is the significance of removing the second staircase? It sounds to me like it makes the building less safe. Are there any implications for types of tenancy?
No, there aren't, Chair. It was an additional, according to the architect, there is a new architect on the scheme. We've asked this question of the architect. There was no requirement from a building regulations or planning perspective or accessibility perspective, any reason from a technical perspective why that second staircase was provided. It was just something that the client had originally requested. And I think it was just for ease of movement within the building. Obviously, that's not now a requirement of the applicant, and the architect has sought to make those changes accordingly. But there is absolutely no technical reason why that second staircase was originally in there.
Do any other members have any questions for the officer? No? Obviously, I mean, this application was approved going back to September in 2019, and really the reason why it's before us today is that there was a breakdown in communications, and I think what we're trying to do today is to resolve the issue. So therefore, I'm going to move the recommendation be approved subject to the further condition in relation to mechanical ventilation. Is that agreed?
Thank you, Chair. Voting is on your motion to approve the recommendation. So, Chair, your vote, please.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
4.
Councillor Bennett.
4.
Councillor Marratt.
4.
Councillor Prince.
4.
Councillor Maloney.
Abstain.
Councillor Key.
4.
Thank you, colleagues. That concludes the voting on this application. The voting is 6 members voting in favour, 1 member abstaining, and Councillor Johansson not participating by virtue of a previously declared interest. The application is therefore approved on that basis.
Could we now move on to item 6, which is the former tea factory at Speak Hall Road? And we have George Brown, the applicant, and Joanna Gilbrexo, the agent. Could I invite George or Joanna to address the committee?
Good morning, Chair, councillors and officers. I'm George Brown, Property Director for Aldi Stores. First slide, please. I welcome your officer's recommendation to approve the application, which will see much needed investment and regeneration in a key gateway location into the city. The former tea factory site on the corner of Speak Road and Speak Hall Road has sat derelict since 2002, and since this point has been through 7 different ownerships, yet each one has failed to secure operators to make the site viable. Much of this comes down to the £750,000 in remediation costs for the site. While the site is allocated for employment, the basic commercial realities mean that the land has negative net value of minus £2 million for that use, and thus it's sat vacant for nearly 20 years. Aldi's long sought a site to serve the catchment in Speke, and the opportunity came to acquire the tea factory site in December 19. Following pre-app, Aldi submitted formal plans in August 20 for a mixed-use scheme by the way of a hybrid application. Today, we're seeking full planning permission for a bespoke 1,800 square metre Aldi food store with 138 parking spaces, a 600 square metre industrial unit, and a full estate road, including access through the site. In addition, we're seeking outline permission for a new petrol filling station, which may include the city's first electric vehicle charging hub, and a Tim Hortons drive-through coffee unit. These operations and the employment unit will be delivered by ANF forecourts, who have a proven track record of development across the region. We're presenting a scheme today which, for the first time, has named operators, which clearly demonstrates a commercially viable proposal. The second slide, please, shows the bespoke design we have for the Aldi store and how it will fit in with the context of the site. The main frontage has been raised to 9 metres, creating a strong tower feature and introduced almost twice the amount of glazing compared to our standard design, including full height glazing to the shop front. The store will feature planked silver cladding, additional pier features along aisle 1 elevation. These additional design changes haven't come cheaply. They've added over £300,000 in build cost. However, they've been agreed with officers given the gateway position of the site. Slide 3, please. The CGI of the proposal gives flavour to how the scheme will look and how it fits in with the wider commercial setting. This brings a very significant improvement to the local environment and will sit as a statement of investment into the city. The Aldi store is located at the south of the scheme with parking wrapped around the front and side. The industrial unit will sit to the rear of this, opposite the coffee drive-through, and to the north of the site is a proposed filling station and electric charging hub. Slide 4, please. The proposed highway solution to the site has been discussed at considerable length with officers. There are 2 access points proposed, both on Speke Hall Road, and this will keep the traffic flowing and the new estate moving. The northern access point will provide a 2-way all movements junction, while the southern access point is a left-in only from Speke Hall Road and will mainly serve the Aldi customers. The Aldi site will provide charging points for 8 electric vehicles with a capacity for 20 included in the development. Aldi will also be undertaking off-site highway works, which are conditioned as part of the proposal. This will include an extension to the cycle path and an assessment of the scoot system once the scheme has been delivered. Furthermore, while our legal advice strongly suggests that the site already meets criteria for accessibility and sustainability, we've agreed with officers that we will upgrade both bus stops on Speke Hall Road, including curbing and lining, while also providing a new shelter for the southbound carriageway, in line with Mersey travel specifications and Condition 17. There's limited impact on the highways network and few new trips at peak hours. The local highway authority is satisfied with the findings of the transport assessment and is supportive of the scheme. And finally, slide 5, please. We are mindful that the site is allocated for employment use and in an out-of-centre location. We've conducted a thorough land, market and viability assessment, which has been vigorously tested by your officers and external independent consultants. They are satisfied with its findings. They recognise the site is not viable for employment use alone. This is clearly evident by the nearly 20 years the site has sat derelict. While the site is out of centre, we prepared a detailed sequential test and retail impact assessment. Both of these have passed. There are no sites in a more central location that can accommodate the development. The proposal is unquestionably a good news story and a show of faith and investment in the City of Liverpool. The scheme regenerates a brownfield site on a key arterial route into the city with a total investment value of over £12 million and has seen 187 letters of support. The scheme will create over 100 new permanent jobs, with the Aldi alone contributing 40 jobs and around £1 million a year in wages into the local economy. The proposal is compatible with and complementary to the surrounding area and will create a sustainable development, meeting the objectives of both the development plan and the MPPF. I thank you for your time and would welcome members approving the scheme today. Thank you.
At this stage, does Joanna wish to address the committee before we move on, or no? Okay. Thanks for that anyway, George. Councillor Key, got a question?
Thank you, Chair. I've got 3 questions. So charging points, you said 8 with a potential to 20. So why not make it 20 straight away? And like when will it be 20? Next one is about the creation of jobs. how can you guarantee that those jobs will go to local people? How will your recruitment process work? And the final one is about the building. So could you just say something about like the heating for the building and any kind of environmental credentials that it might or might not have? Thank you.
More than happy to address those in turn. Sorry, firstly, the question was charging points. Yeah, our standard policy is to put 4 in to begin with, although we've agreed with officers we'll start with 8. All of the infrastructure is already in place. It just then needs just the unit heads going on top as and when they get used. We wouldn't put all 20 in at this stage because our previous schemes that we've rolled this out in just haven't seen that level of usage. But as soon as it is viable with the volume of vehicles on the network, we'll just drop those units in. As I said, the infrastructure is already in. Also, ANF forecourts, who we have a deal with for the remainder of the site. Their latest plan is to deliver a fully electric charging station at the north of the site, so there won't be any lack of provision. In terms of employment, we recruit locally as a standard. We do that in every store that we've got in Liverpool. It's important for us that our employees can get to the store as quickly as possible, spend less time on the network, but can also be flexible. We don't have 400 or 500 employees in every store. We'll have 40, maybe 50 in this location. But when you're running a smaller operation, it can be this fact if someone calls in sick, you want someone to be available locally. So for us, we always recruit, and we'll always hold our local recruitment drives in locations that are neighbouring to the site. So that's where we focus our advertising. Finally, in terms of the energy for the store, we actually use a very highly efficient heat recovery system that takes all of the heat generated from things like our chillers and freezers and uses the power generated from that to heat the store. So we get 100% of the store's heating from the equipment that we actually use in store. And in total, that generates more than 40% of the store's total energy requirement. The rest is all obtained through renewable sources as well. So it's something we're very keen on, both from an environmental and responsibility perspective, but also from a utility saving perspective as well.
Thanks, George. Councillor Maloney.
Thanks, Chair. I do welcome the electric vehicle charging provision, and I think it's actually very good foresight to have a greater capacity that is actually going to be installed. The reason I say that is one of the big problems with electric vehicle charging is that each manufacturer has its own standard for charging, especially fast charging, and that makes it very difficult for organisations to install electric vehicle charging points that will be usable, especially the high capacity, faster ones. And what's needed really is international legislation to establish the standardized charging structure. And I think that I appreciate that you've got a real problem there. And I think that's why the provision of the capacity without actually installing all of the positions is a very good thing. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to ask a question about footfall. You know, not everybody uses the car. And Speakhall Road is a very busy road, you know, two-way traffic, very busy road. So I just wondered if there was any way that the within this plan there was, you know, provision for, you know, a crossing as well at all, or is, you know, because I can't recall there being, you know, pedestrian crossings at all around this. I mean, I haven't been there for a while, but I don't think there is.
Would you like to answer, or we wait till the officer summarises it?
I can answer an element of it. So I'll defer to Andy on the crossing point, but we've worked very closely with officers over the last 12, 14 months, sometimes with frayed tempers, but I'm sure we're all friends now. It has been a challenging application. However, we have come to a very good agreement with officers that help the sustainability. As I said during the speech, we're confident that the site already meets the sustainability and accessibility requirements. However, on officers' insistence, we are upgrading the 2 bus stops that service the site, providing a new stop on the southern-bound carriageway, and we're very confident that that will aid the site being accessible for people that aren't travelling by car.
Okay. Do any other members have any questions or comments before I bring the officer in? Okay, can I bring John in to summarise this application?
Thank you, Chair. Just on that previous point, I'll just point out that there are full pedestrian crossing facilities on the main junction on Speke Road and Speke Hall Road. Okay, I picked up an email this morning just on my way to the committee, which is a further objection which I need to report. It's been submitted by an agent on behalf of Asda stores. I'll just have to read it out, I'm afraid. Having reviewed the committee report, my client has detected some legal errors. The list is not exhaustive and my client may raise additional points in the event that the application is positively determined. Firstly, the council have not determined the application whilst properly applying Regulation 122 of the SIL Regulations 2010. The council have sought a public art contribution within a Section 106 agreement. This has no relationship to the planning application. Indeed, it appears to be a generic tax that is imposed on all applications. There is no purported relationship between the contribution and the application, and thus the SIL regulations have not been complied with. Secondly, the officer report mistakes UDP policy E1. The report misquotes the policy at paragraph 1.5. Policy requires all criterion to be applied. However, the report misquotes the policy as if each criterion is in the alternative. The end of Roman numeral 4 says or, and further, the policy as quoted does not cite the Roman numerals correctly. Numerals 4 and 5 are given as the same point, and numeral 5 is missed out. Whilst it is acknowledged that the officer report notes there is conflict with the policy, it is still incumbent on the council to understand the extent of that breach so that the weight to be afforded to the breach can be properly considered. By failing to apply all of the criterion within the policy correctly, this clearly has not occurred. Thirdly, the officer report treats the site as being previously developed land. However, to be previously developed land, the site has to be occupied by a permanent structure, and the remains of the structure have not blended into the landscape. This definition is clearly not satisfied. This has a bearing on the landscape impacts and benefits of the proposal, especially given that this is cited as a benefit of the proposal at paragraph 122 of the officer report. Fourthly, the council has sought to apply policy EC2 to the scheme. However, the policy, it is unclear which version of the draft policy is being applied in light of main modifications proposed to the policy. This ought to be clarified so that it can be understood how the policy is said to apply. Fifthly, no consideration has been given to open space within the site. And finally, the report relies on a number of statutory consultations that are not available. Apologies, Chair, for having to read all that out. I don't know whether you want me to address those individual points or...
I mean, yeah, we could just sort of summarise. I mean, the objections from Asda, I mean, they're saying that we're in breach or the council's in breach of policy, and clearly we're not, as I understand the report before us.
Okay, but I'll just run through them briefly, Chair. In terms of the community infrastructure levy regulations, Liverpool City Council don't apply these regulations. We tend to rely on Section 106 agreements. Secondly, the references to policy E1, the committee report considers the relevant parts of the policy that are particularly relevant to this application. There is reference to the full policy in the report, although some parts of it which don't apply have not been specifically referred to. The site is previously developed land. There were still structures on it until fairly recently, until the current applicants started work to remediate the land. And policy EC2, local plan policy, it's the latest version with the latest sets of modifications is reported clearly in the committee report. Fifth point was about open space. There's no requirement in Liverpool planning policies to consider open space as part of industrial or commercial development. And all statutory consultation responses are available if people were to request copies of them. Okay. Can I draw the committee members' attention to the chair's note that has been distributed? There's a number of planning conditions that have been discussed over the last couple of weeks, and a few changes to conditions. They're all set out clearly for members there. There's one condition that has been removed that related to a trigger point for delivery of the employment units. You'll note from the chair's note that the trigger has been put back 18 months. We were originally asking for the employment units to be provided before the store was opened. But due to contractual arrangements with the developer and the developer who will be delivering that unit along with the petrol filling station, that will be delayed by 18 months. But we've moved that requirement into the legal Section 106 agreement to give it some more legal standing. I'll run through the report briefly. The tea factory site is an application for full planning permission for an Aldi supermarket and a 600 square metre business unit, along with outline permission for a drive-through restaurant and a filling station. It's on a prominent site on Speak Road, diagonally opposite the Dobbys Garden Centre. Members will see from the report that there's been a lot of support for the scheme from local residents, although there are objections from rival food retailers, raising concerns about impact on the nearby retail centres. The scheme proposes out-of-centre retail development on a site allocated for employment purposes in the UDP and local plan. And there's a detailed analysis of our employment land policies in your report, which concludes that the economic, social and environmental benefits of the development would outweigh the economic impact to the city of the loss of the employment land. There's also an assessment of the retail impact on existing centres, which suggests a 6% impact on Speak in terms of trade diversion, 2% on Woolton and Belvale, and 1% on Garston. These impacts are not considered to be significantly adverse and would not warrant a refusal on retail impact grounds. The applicant has carried out a retail sequential test, and there are no in-centre sites available or suitable. There's a package of highway interventions required, which are set out in the planning conditions, and the site car parks include the required amount of accessible spaces and vehicle charging points. The applicant has engaged in the design process, and the position of the store at the back of the site is the only one that really works in terms of customer access and servicing. Efforts have been made to enliven the appearance of the Aldi store to add interest, and the landscaping scheme will make a positive environmental improvement to the site. The legal agreement is required relating to public art, monitoring fees, and to ensure that the employment units are completed within 18 months of the Aldi store opening. The scheme has significant local support and is recommended for approval subject to the legal agreement and conditions in the report and the changes in the table committee note. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, John. Do members have any questions? No? Well, given the recommendation, I just think this is a good news story. I think it's good for the city of Liverpool. Investments in jobs is always welcome. So therefore, can I move that the recommendation as amended be approved? Is that agreed?
Thank you, Chair. Voting is on the Chair's resolution, which is to approve the application. Chair, your vote, please.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Bennett.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Hanson.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Mallet.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Prince.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Maloney.
4.
And Councillor Key.
4.
That concludes the voting on this item. The application is therefore approved unanimously by the committee. Thank you.
Could we now move on to item 7, which is land at Beacon Lane? And we have Jared Heffy, who's going to address the committee. And I don't know if there's another applicant, but anyway, Jared, if you'd like to address the committee on this application, please.
Yeah. Hi everyone. Yeah, my name is Jared Teffy from Mersey Regeneration. We're a SME developer based in Liverpool. Thanks very much to Katie for the report. What we're proposing, six 3-bed houses on Beacon Lane. You'll see from the plans there, it's 100% off-road parking, so each house has got their own parking space, along with front and rear gardens, rear bin storage. What you can't see on the plan, the bus links. So there's bus stops right facing the site. To the left, you've got Everton Road going into the city centre towards the Royal Hospital. To the right, you've got buses taking you towards County Road, the local high street. Next slide, please. So, 2-storey housing, traditional brick and block build, wheelchair friendly, as mentioned in the report. We've made provisions for downstairs toilets. We've got patios in the living room just to maximise the natural light, along with two windows in the front bedroom and a window each in the rear bedrooms, just to say maximise the light. The bedroom windows are also fire escape, which complies with local building regs. Next slide, please. Yeah. So what we're proposing for the site, it'll bring an 83% spend. We're in the local area. This is in terms of labour and materials. So we try to procure as much as we can, as close as possible to the site. The intention is for the houses to be for affordable rent. So ultimately they'll go to a housing association. National space standards, flat level access so that we can get wheelchairs in and out of the houses without any issues. We use local authority building control just to give councils that extra peace of mind. And we've already been in contact with the Department for Transport regarding the stopping up. That's all fine. They're happy with that. Just to go on to a couple of the responses received back. One of them being about kids playing on the land and also dog walkers. As you can see from the image, there's actually a site 3 times bigger just over the road. The site of our planned development, that's next to a pub, so the chances of broken glass quite high. I'm not sure it's really a place where you'd walk dogs or let children play. Obviously, you've got however many acre site facing you with Everton Park, the best place for kids to play, and you're also not far from Stanley Park, so not short of green space around that area. On the next slide, again, just addressing a few of the responses received. So what we've done is we've mapped out the route to the 3 local schools, which we're assuming is North Liverpool Academy and then Beacon and OLI. So one of the responses, children cut through the site on the way to school. As you can see there from the images, they actually wouldn't. You might get 17 houses on the side of the Dairy Club that possibly cut through, but it's not a usual route. On the next slide, you'll see in regards to the what have they said about the narrow pavements. The pavement's actually 1.6 metres, which equates to over 5 foot. So again, it's not narrow at all. But what you also have around the site is you've got 5 drop curbs, so it's very pedestrian friendly around there. No issues with pedestrians crossing any way you want to go. So yeah, thanks again to Katie for the report, and happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Jared. Do members of the committee have any questions? No? John, would you like to come in? Oh, sorry about that, Councillor Key.
Sorry, I was a bit late on this. Yeah, so residents, neighbours raise objections about it being a green space. So the objection is other local green spaces have already been developed. Could you clarify whether it is a green space or not?
I'll ask John to clarify that now.
But thank you, Chair. I mean, this is a relatively straightforward application insofar as it's 6 houses. It's not a major application. These types of applications are normally dealt with under delegated authority by your officers without the need to come to committee. The reason that this is before you is because in this particular case there is a Section 106 obligation associated with it. So obviously grateful to the presentation. So I don't want to go through too much of the detail in the report. Just picking up on the question that's been raised then about the status of the land. You'll see on paragraph 1.1 that the application site is actually allocated as part of a primarily residential area. So this is not an allocated piece of green space. It clearly has the appearance of a green area. It's currently grassed over, and there are some trees that have been planted in addition to some that have self-seeded as well. But it's not a formally designated open space or green space in either the local plan or the previous UDP. In fact, this has almost certainly been a previously developed site that has had some interim treatment in the short term, and it's obviously been used for informal recreation during that time. So in your officer's view, the principle is clearly one that is acceptable in this location. The issue that has triggered the need for it to be considered by this committee is around those trees that are on the site, some of them of which have been planted recently, and others, as I said, have been self-seeded. And obviously to replace those, there isn't sufficient space within the curtilage of the properties themselves. And so we're asking for an additional payment for the replacement of those trees on a one-for-one basis. Just for clarity, Chair, what you will normally see on major schemes and applications that are presented to you is for replacement trees, for money in lieu of replacement trees rather, is £4,000. That is for street trees under the specific terms of the policy. That is not something that we're applying here. What we're asking for is replacement trees because of the ones that are lost. And so the amount is slightly different. They're not having to go into tree pits in the street. They'll be planted elsewhere, possibly within a green space. And therefore the amount that we're asking for is significantly less than the usual £4,000. So just wanted to make that clarification for you, Chair. But subject to the legal agreement and the conditions set out, this is acceptable. Happy to answer any questions, Chair.
Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a quick question on the conservation specialists, because it's close to a conservation area. And it says on there, selecting bricks that will be complementary to the nearby list of buildings would ensure there's no harm. There is no setting of the list of buildings. Do we know what type of bricks that the...
Not at this stage, Chair, but clearly there is a condition in there requiring submission of brick samples.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and they'll be shared with our conservation colleagues to ensure they're compatible.
Do any other members have any questions? No? Okay. I mean, I think this is a straightforward application. It's a former brownfield site, so I'm going to move that the recommendation be approved. Is that agreed?
Thank you, Chair. Voting is on your motion to approve. Your vote, please.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Hanson.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Mallet.
4.
Councillor Prince.
4.
Councillor Maloney.
4.
Councillor Key.
4.
Councillor Bennett, lastly, you did indicate an interest at the start of proceedings and you stated it was non-pecuniary. The effect of that means you're not voting on this application. Am I correct? Is that correct?
Sorry, Chair, it's not this application. It's
okay.
The application to ACTA.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. In which case, your vote, please.
4.
Thank you. That concludes the voting on the application, and the voting is unanimous and the application is approved on that basis.
Thanks, Mike. Can we move on then to item 8, which is 39 Boland Avenue? And we haven't got any speakers for or against, so we can ask the officer to take us through this application.
Thank you, Chair. This is an application for 39 Boland Avenue. It's proposal for single-storey and two-storey extensions to the front, side and rear of a semi-detached property. The application is before the Planning Committee today because the applicant is a council employee and an objection was received. So under the Code of Conduct, it needs to be considered by committee. You'll maybe noted from the Chair's note that's been distributed that objection has subsequently been withdrawn. But we still think it's pertinent for the committee to make a decision on the application. The single-storey extensions at the rear and side and the two-storey extension, which is at the side and extends beyond the rear, been examined in respect to their impact on the adjoining semi-detached house and the adjacent house at the side, and they're considered acceptable in terms of their size, their appearance, their relationships to neighbouring habitable rooms, and in terms of any overlooking. A small extension at the front of the house would be acceptable in the street scene and retains sufficient space for parking at the front of the property. Proposal also includes rendering the home, which is acceptable in this street because it's in keeping with other properties. The extensions are in line with current council policies and they are recommended for approval subject to conditions.
Thanks, John. Do any members have any questions or comments? No? Straightforward application, I think. So can I move that the recommendation be approved?
Thank you, Chair. Voting is on the Chair's motion to approve. Your vote, please, Chair.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Bennett.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Mallet.
4.
Councillor Prince.
4.
Councillor Maloney.
4.
And Councillor Key.
4.
That concludes the voting on this application. Of those members present and voting, the voting is unanimous and the application is approved.
Thanks, Mike. We move on now to our last item, item 9, which is Barnfield Drive, Liverpool, Nottingham Ward. There are no speakers in favour, but we do have a local resident who wishes to object. Is there? He's on Teams. Okay. Would you like to address the committee?
Yes, please. Thank you. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to address the committee this morning. And it's in reference to a proposed application for a 15-metre monopole telecommunications structure to go on the corner of Barnfield Drive and Eaton Road. And my issue with it is that I question actually the necessity for this. I live literally 10 metres from this, right opposite my front door. And when the application first came through my front door, I took the letter around to a number of other residents, a number of who said that they hadn't received the letter. I do know that there have been other objections, but nobody addressed the committee. I've had back and forth emails with Councillor Pam Thomas, who unfortunately is away on holiday and has been very supportive during this period when I've had email communication with her. As I said, I live literally right opposite this structure. It's almost at the entrance to the Bill Shankly playing fields. In addition, there are four other monopoles of the same structure. There are 3 on Queen's Drive and 1 on Eaton Road. All 4 are within a 5-minute walk of this proposed structure. I cannot for the life of me see any reason why. It's a really nice area, West Derby. It's a highly residential area. I mean, I myself and the neighbours around that area, forever improving their homes, both internally and externally, to have this, what I can only describe as a monstrosity. It can't be disguised, it can't be camouflaged. As I say, there's 4 within a 5-minute walk away. It's not a business park. It's a really nice residential area. I don't see why it can't be. Well, if there is a need for it in the first place, why it can't be sited elsewhere. You know, there's a large Tesco's at the bottom of the same road on Daysbrook Lane with a huge car park. You know, that may be a better location for this. The residential amenity of this area will be severely impacted. It has a negative visual impact. You know, myself and a lot of neighbours, you know, we all work hard to live in a nice area. I just don't see the need for it at all. I really cannot see the need for this at all, and that's the basis of my objection.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Lally. Do any members of the committee have any questions for Mr. Lally before we move on?
Sorry, my name's Jonathan Hoy.
Pardon?
My name's Jonathan Hoy. My name's not Lally. My name's Jonathan Hoy.
It was on my screen, Mr. Lally, but okay, sorry about that, Jonathan. Does anybody have any questions? No? Okay, can I bring in the officer to summarise this application, John?
Thank you, Chair. Again, just to draw to your attention, the further representations were received by Councillor Thomas that are on your update note. Chair, again, you've got a full report before you which sets out the issues that this committee is able to take into account in the consideration of this particular proposal. It's a type of application that this committee is very familiar with, and you'll be aware that as a prior approval application, the only issues that you can take into account relate to siting and design. You'll see from the report, Chair, that this was originally an 18-metre mast. Your officers have negotiated with the applicants to try and reduce that down to 15 so as to limit the visual impact. You'll see where it is from the accompanying site plan, and you'll see that it's seen against the context of the open Bill Shankly playing fields. And that's one of the reasons why we've tried to get it reduced so it has less of a visual impact than it might otherwise have, because it is seen against that open backdrop. Clearly, there are many in more urban locations that are seen against the backdrop of buildings, which tend to be a little less visible. Nonetheless, your officers have concluded that in this particular case, both the siting and the design of the structure are acceptable in this location, particularly now given its reduced height. Issues around the that have been raised there by the objector about the need for it. Clearly, that is a matter for the telecommunications provider. In submitting applications, they do have to demonstrate that they've looked at alternative sites, and they've done that with this particular application. There will be particular technical requirements why it needs to be in this location. This is to support 5G. The 5G masts aren't always compatible. Sorry, start that again. The existing masts aren't always compatible to be shared with the new 5G technology. So it is necessary sometimes, more often than not, to be honest, that new masts are required. Again, my understanding is that the 5G technology requires slightly more masts than the previous technology as well. Clearly, as officers, we will always encourage mass sharing where this is possible, but that hasn't been possible in this particular case. So for all the reasons that are set out in the report, Chair, we consider that the siting and design of this particular mast is appropriate and have recommended approval accordingly.
Thanks, John. Do any members have any questions? Councillor Prince.
Yeah, I'd like a bit more information on what other alternative sites had been used. And again, I'm not convinced about the idea that you can't share other existing masts, because there are plenty of masts near there. as mentioned as well on the Tesco site. But also, if you moved it to the other side of the Bill Shankly playing field, it would back onto the loop line, I think, which would be a much more convenient site for a new mast.
John?
Apologies, Chair, I don't have the file or the information in front of me to specifically reference the sites that have been submitted.
Okay, any other members have any questions or comments? I mean, these are always, I mean, we've had a number of these applications before this committee on numerous occasions, and basically we're told really there's not a great deal we can do in relation to the actual sort of technology. It's something that we can't really object to. The only conditions that we've really got is in relation to where it's sited. And in relation to this particular application, the officers are saying that the siting is acceptable in this case, and the design as well. And they have them in these areas because it's driven by demand. And that's the reason for, you know, if you like 5G technology, people want to use 5G technology. So I understand the concerns and the objections from local residents, but in relation to this particular application, I think that the officers is correct in putting this forward. So can I move that the recommendation be approved? Is that agreed?
Thank you, Chair. Voting is on the Chair's motion, the effect of which will be to approve the application subject to the prior approval process. So, Chair, your vote, please.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Hanson.
I missed half the presentation. I won't be voting.
Councillor Marrett.
4.
Councillor Prince.
Not voting.
Councillor Maloney.
Abstain.
Councillor Key.
Abstain.
That concludes the voting on the application. We have 3 members voting in favour, no members voting against, and we have a number of abstentions from Councillors John Prince, Councillor Maloney, and from Councillor Anna Key. We therefore, in terms of the voting, there is an equality in terms of voting position. However, the Chair has already cast a vote in favour of the application. So, Chair, would you like to confirm your vote in terms of the casting vote position?
Yes, I'd like to confirm my vote.
Thank you, Chair. In which case, the equality is resolved to the exercise of the Chair's casting vote, and the application is therefore approved on that basis. Thank you, colleagues.
Well, that brings us to the end of this planning committee. Can I just thank members and officers for attending today, and wish you the rest of the day for a nice day, I think. Hopefully the weather will improve. So thank you once again for attending. Thank you.